Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. My guest today, Dr. Ryan Scott, is a successful podiatric physician in Phoenix, Arizona. Dr. Scott practices with the Core Institute, and he is the fellowship director for the Core Foot and Ankle Advanced Reconstructive Fellowship. Dr. Scott attended the Des Moines University College of Podiatric Medicine and Surgery. He completed his 3 years of surgical training at the Detroit Medical Center, and he completed a 1-year fellowship with the Orthopedic Foot and Ankle Center in Westerville, Ohio. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that as we go.
Yes, we will.
Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Scott.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm really glad you could be here. Thank you for making the trip down to Scottsdale today.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes down the road from my house.
Nothing wrong with that. You know, Dr. Scott, we are informal on Dean's Chat, and if it's okay with you, let's go with Ryan and Jeff.
So I actually would prefer that.
Me too. So we're rolling. So I always like to talk about the latest and greatest, Ryan, and there's so much discussion around fellowship training in our profession. I was hoping that you could help shed some light on the pros and cons of fellowships. I have not had the opportunity to have fellowship directors on Dean's Chat, so I'm so glad you're here.
Sure. Yeah. So fellowship is one of those things that's just, it's up and coming, right? If you look at the general trends of medicine across the board, most MDs and DO colleagues go into advanced training and fellowship, and this seems to be the biggest trend right now in podiatric surgery. And just kind of looking at it from inception, say, let's call it 15 years ago. Very few fellowships existed. Nowadays, 65, 70 fellowship programs are out there. So it's definitely a hot topic. And those of us that are in it look at it as a great thing. And people from the outside may look at it as like, hey, you know what? That's a different level or different league. I don't know if I want to get into that, or maybe, hey, that's what I aspire to be.
Right. And it seems to be threatening in some ways, too.
Very much so. So it's a double-edged sword, right? And there's a lot of great things that have come before the fellowship program. There'll be a lot of great things to come after the fellowship programs.
Okay, so let's look at the big picture. So there's about round numbers, right? 500 plus graduates each year from the 3-year surgical training programs. And so I guess you're talking about 15% of those are going to go on to fellowship training?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
So that makes sense. So you had fellowship training. Did you know you were going to go to do a fellowship when you were in school or in your residency, or how did that play out for you?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of an idea, kind of growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, go Browns. Just kind of looking at overall the big picture. I was an athlete growing up. I had multiple sports-related injuries, all foot and ankle because I was a soccer player. Growing up, my next-door neighbor was Dr. Gerard Yu. And across the street was the chair of orthopedics for the Cleveland Clinic. So I kind of knew I had a little bit of an interest in medicine. Just didn't quite know where I wanted to go. The soccer, the multiple injuries ultimately led me back to foot and ankle, and here's where we're at today.
So what was it like having Dr. Yu as a neighbor?
You know, that was really interesting. In undergrad, I didn't know what I was getting into. I knew him as my next-door neighbor, right? I did not understand the power that man held and ultimately the roads that he paved for everybody else behind him. I remember sitting at dinners, industry dinners, because he would drive me to work every morning and he would drive me back home. So I would tag along to some of these things and I would be a fly on the wall watching him interact and run a room, and it was absolutely incredible.
Wow. So it's no wonder you went into podiatry then at the end of the day.
It's exactly it. Yeah, having mentors like him and someone to look up to, someone to aspire, just watching his poise in everyday life was unbelievable for me.
So Ryan, not everybody has the perspective that you have when the doctor across the street is a foot and ankle MD and Gerard Yu's next door and he's one of the leading podiatric surgeons in the country.
Right.
You knew what you were getting into.
I did. I knew it would be a little bit of a turf battle, a little bit of a war, but I wanted to get into foot and ankle as fast as I could, and that seemed to be the most appropriate road for me.
Okay, so you were on a mission.
I was.
And then you went to the Des Moines University
Yes.
College of Podiatric Medicine and Surgery.
Yes.
And that was an interesting 4 years. How did you go about trying to decide where you wanted to do your residency program?
That's actually a great question. So Des Moines, the way Des Moines was set up is probably very similar to the way yours is set up. Is 4th year is all externships, and you get to pick where you want to go. Being from Cleveland, family from Cleveland, I kind of wanted to stay in the Midwest. So I went through some programs in Ohio, Detroit, and then in Louisville, Kentucky before I ended up out here doing some rotations locally here in Phoenix.
Very good. And then you went to the Detroit Medical Center.
I did.
And that must have been just a lot of different pathologies. That's an understatement, right?
Yes. Yeah, different pathologies is very much an understatement. I wouldn't trade it for the world, though. And what I always tell people is residency and education, what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And that ultimately determines your entire career.
I hope you're all listening out there. Those are words of wisdom right there.
Yes, it's a lot of hours of just grinding.
All right. Well, let's talk about that for a minute,
Yeah.
because our students here at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine are very similar to the Des Moines University College of Podiatric Medicine. They're taking basic science courses with the DO students, and really they're setting the stage for that next phase of life. Our job is to prepare them for residencies.
Absolutely.
So we're giving them instructions to go around the country, take advantage of this wonderful opportunity to see the best and brightest of our profession wherever it is. So that's so important. And I try to tell our students, it's going to cost a little more money, but you get the opportunity to go to Washington State or Florida or Scripps or Texas, these great programs. Was that your philosophy back when you were a student too?
Absolutely. I went to where I could afford, but also if it needed to stretch a few credit cards, I stretched a few credit cards because of the experience and the exposure you just discussed.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, every year, right now there's third-year residents. 500 plus of them are going to graduate in June, 6 months from now. And like we said, about 15% will be doing fellowships. Can you kind of walk us through the fellowship process? When residents start to interview for the positions, because I know it's getting pushed earlier and earlier and earlier now. And then you can talk specifically about core, but fellowships in general with that trend. What are they looking for, and what's the process?
Yeah, so the process has evolved quite a bit. And like you said, as programs are interviewing earlier and earlier and earlier. And I think a lot of that is really just because the game has been very cutthroat, right? So everybody always wants the cream of the crop. They want to be able to pick up front. The nice thing is ACFAS is kind of starting to standardize some of this stuff, right? So prior to, say, 6 or 7 years ago, we did not have a standardized application, right? Every program had their own recommendations on what they wanted, but no standard application. Now there is a standard application, which makes life very simple, right? You go to the ACFAS website, look at the fellowship column, boom, there it is. If you're interested in fellowship, I'd highly recommend you spend a lot of time looking at that, because each of the individual programs require some stuff outside of that application. Also, they have very differing dates as far as interview times and do they want site visits or do they do rolling admissions, right? So some of them just do rolling interviews at the same time, where we have a formal standard interview once we've kind of gone through the application process.
Interesting. So how many residents apply to the core fellowship program?
So last year, I think we had about 46 or 47 apply. We take 2 fellows every year.
2 per year, and it's a 1-year program.
It's a 1-year program.
And then when they graduate from that 1-year program, are you seeing their world opened up to additional opportunities because they did that extra year of fellowship?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of our fellows that at least come through our program are very self-motivated, and they go out and they really work hard and really set up those interviews and their site visits at potential job opportunities. We've had fellows that have created job opportunities out of thin air in practices that they didn't even know they needed foot and ankle. So it's been very intriguing watching these fellows kind of continue to grow and mature and figure out what they want in life and just help give them a little bit of guidance to go do those things.
That's great. So what are you looking for in a fellow? Because I've heard different stories.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you take the residents that have gone to top programs, let's say top 15 programs in the country, and then there's arguments that those students or residents don't need a fellowship training.
Yeah.
Then there's the other argument that if you didn't get quite the experience that you wanted as a resident, that fellowship training would fill those gaps. What's your thoughts on that?
So I love the way you kind of baited this for me, right? Because you can go both ways on this, right? So the way I look at it is I don't feel that fellowship is an extension of residency.
Okay.
If anything, it's there to fine-tune some things, really kind of dial you in. I love watching the fellows come in their first month and think they know everything, and then all of a sudden you turn them loose a little bit, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, maybe I don't know as much. But what we all kind of look for is probably very different, right? So in our program, there's 5 or 6 different attendings. We're all looking for something slightly different. I think the biggest thing that we all look for is someone who can be our shadow for a year and someone we can shadow for a year. And at the end of the day, it's personality and it's fit for us.
Okay.
Whether that's someone from the top programs or someone from the bottom programs, we don't kind of take that into play. It's really how we feel you would fit here. I'm a very academic person, and I'll get really deep into the literature, and I'd want to know who wrote the article, when was it written, what journal was it written.
Love that.
Yeah, I'm extremely academic. I was not that way when I was going through school. I did what I needed to do to get by, and as I got deeper into our career, I really developed a passion for it. And all of a sudden, you looked at my iPad, it's nothing but journal articles and working on research and stuff like that. It's really become a big-time passion of mine.
That's great. You know who that reminds me of is Dr. Jack Schubert.
Oh, yeah.
He was very much like that. I
Yeah.
interviewed him a couple weeks ago, and I was mesmerized. I forgot I was doing the Dean's Chat as the host. I was just listening to him. But very similar mindset.
Yeah.
All right, so here's another kind of interesting question. Are there certain residency programs that you're more prone to bring someone in from, or are there schools that the students went to that you may be more prone to taking fellows from? How does that work?
Yeah, so historically, if you looked at our hierarchy on where we all have pulled from, yeah, there's probably a few. But I'm very cognizant that I don't pull back-to-back fellows out of the same program, or if I do, it's going to be very rare. I like to keep it very open. I like the variety. I don't want the same resident or fellow or thought process every single year because I then kind of get a little bored.
Makes sense.
Right? But what I would say, and I'm going to say this very vocally, I went to DMU, right? And there's a reason for that. I'm very close with you guys here at Midwestern. I think that should speak a lot of volumes as far as what we like to see. I think the academics are phenomenal at both of those schools.
You know, it's interesting you say that because Dr. Kevin Smith and I have become really good friends, and there's a lot of commonalities in our two schools. And oftentimes when I'm interviewing students, they'll call me after they've been accepted, and they'll say, well, I'm debating. I don't know if I should go to Des Moines or Arizona, because those are the two they're looking at.
You know, that for me would probably be a flip of a coin at this time. When I was applying, Midwestern didn't exist.
Well, that's a good point.
So,
no, that's a really, really good point. All right, so let's talk about your personal practice. So how many cases a year do you do at Core? I know it's a heavy surgical emphasis.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have group numbers or personal numbers. How many cases are you doing?
Yeah, we kind of look at everything as a division. So if I were to take a 50,000-foot overview, I'm probably doing somewhere between 500 and 600 cases a year. So we're pretty busy. We're running our fellows pretty good. So they typically come out of our program 600 cases apiece. We very, very rarely let them double scrub.
Okay.
We want them completely separate. But if it's something unique, interesting that we maybe see one or two of those in a year, we'll always have them double scrub so they get that opportunity.
Very good. You know, it's interesting because when I was interviewing some of the students and residents from other programs earlier in the year, there were some that had to reschedule their interviews because they were off to do fellowship interviews. So like you said, I mean, so for next year, starting in July, do you already have your new fellows picked out?
For 20, what are we on? 23, 24.
To start in 24.
Yep. Yes, we do. We have 24 and 25. Yeah, so year 24, 25 already picked. We picked those back in June.
That soon?
Yeah, so it's almost a full year because if we look at credentialing processes, getting people on boards at hospitals and stuff, it takes 6 to 9 months.
Okay, so this is getting more granular for me now.
Oh, yeah.
So residents are starting to interview for fellowships at the beginning of their second year so that they're locked down even before their third year starts.
Yeah.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you told me that you had been working with ACFAS in their fellowship process. Can you share with us a little information on that?
Yeah, it's been great watching the transition from, hey, we don't know what this is, into having its own legs at this point, right? Okay. So like I said earlier, we have a formal application now. They have a very large committee within ACFAS that's very well recognized. They have a board member on there that's kind of going through things. They're constantly pushing the envelope on how to continue to oversee fellowship programs so that way they're truly academic and not necessarily more of just a cheap associate.
That makes sense.
But yeah, they're doing a great job. They're continuing to push that envelope. And for everyone that's interested in fellowships, hopefully you go to the big annual scientific meeting this year in Tampa. They do a wonderful fellowship breakfast every day or every morning where they can have the chance to sit down and talk with some of the directors, or you grab the directors in the hallway.
Okay.
So
it sounds like with a central application process, is there for lack of a better term, is there a curriculum for the year that is standardized or not really?
No, there's not a standardized curriculum for the fellowship academic year. And I would say that changes from year to year for us. And a lot of that, I let our fellows kind of drive that, right? So when we pick our fellows and we sit down, all of us together, what do you guys want to get out of fellowship? Do you want to get more out of billing? Do you want to get more out of surgical practice? Do you want to get more out of the office? Do you want to go scrub cases with our traumatologists in level 1 trauma centers? So we kind of set up the year on the fly as things go. I always know where the fellows are at all times.
Right.
But we like to tailor it to them and let them kind of be the owner of it. They took a year out of their life. They probably took a big financial hit. So we let them really kind of tell us what they want to do, and then we open the doors and let them walk through them.
That's brilliant. I want to come over and do your fellowship.
We would love it. I mean, we can get hot-headed sometimes, though. So
no, that's great.
We recommend people with thick skin, that's for sure.
No, that's good. I went to Kern Hospital back in the day, and you had to have thick skin.
Oh, yeah.
And in a similar vein, every year they would take 6 residents, but they would take them from different schools. So all the new residents would show up with a different mindset from each of the colleges of podiatric medicine, and that spurred some curious debate at times.
Would you guys leave with the same thought process, though, or did you guys all continue to have your separate thought processes?
No. Very early on, we were trained the Kern Hospital way, and that involved cadavers, that involved clearing lectures, it involved clearing labs, so you couldn't throw a suture until you went through the clearing lecture and the clearing lab. Yep. You couldn't do a soft tissue procedure until you went through a clearing lecture and a clearing lab, and there were 100 attendings at the time.
Oh, yeah.
They pushed us hard academically.
Yeah, there was a lot of cross between Kern and DMC when I was
up
there.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And so I was there in the early 90s, and it was 2 of the best years of my life. And it's interesting. Had I had the opportunity to do a fellowship, I would have jumped all over it.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think that you only have one time in life where you can really go for it. Because once you fast forward any of us 5 years down the road, family, kids, cars, homes, you can't just take a year off and go do a fellowship.
Well, interesting you say that, actually. So at OFA, where I did my fellowship every year, they take a MD, a DO, and a DPM, right? So we all come from different backgrounds.
Interesting.
During my year, we had, who has now become one of my very, very, very close friends. He's up in Washington and runs his own program, and I'm sure you guys can kind of puzzle piece things together very quickly. He was in practice for 15, 16 years and did not like the way his career was going and closed his practice, gave up his practice, came down and spent 4 months with us in Columbus, then went back and started a whole new career at an orthopedic practice, and basically went from hitting that burnout phase to absolutely falling back in love with the profession. And he does wonders, and he travels all over the world. And I love connecting with him and just hearing his things. So I would agree with you, but I'd also kind of disagree with you on that.
That's a great story.
It's never too late to reevaluate life and life goals and figure out where to go.
No, that's fair. Well, so we all shift gears in some ways. I mean, I went from 17 years in private practice to being a dean.
Yeah.
That was a learning curve that I wasn't anticipating.
Yeah.
So I get it. That makes sense. So I have a question for you, and I get this asked a lot. There are fellowships that are considered ACFAS fellowships. Mm-hmm. And then there are fellowships that are kind of stamp of approval by the Council on Podiatric Medical Education.
Sure.
There's a dotted line between some of them. Some are both, right?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that, and where's that going down the road?
Yeah, I don't know where they stand right now, but I was on the committee for a while, and I was chair of the committee for a little bit. And the way we looked at it is the CPME original ones were kind of a little bit more heavy on the forefoot wound care, and academic research.
Okay.
The FACFAS ones were more geared towards the surgically based stuff. And there's 2 different ways to also look at that too. And I think a lot of it just depends on what kind of aspirations and career goals do you have. I think we as healthcare professionals know that everybody needs to have both of those options readily available. Otherwise, we can't provide the care that we need to give to our patients.
I absolutely agree with you. No, that makes sense. And I imagine that will be the road that it continues to take.
Yeah, we'll see. We will see.
All right. So what would you tell a prospective student contemplating a career in podiatric medicine?
Oh, wow. Okay. It is a absolutely rewarding career. I've been doing this. I've been in private practice at Core now for 12 years, and just watching the revelation of foot and ankle surgery, right? So it was always taught that, hey, you're going to be a podiatrist, you're going to go and have to let all the orthopedists take all the big hindfoot stuff, where now in this point, it's 50-50 and everyone's moving in the right direction. And I think the continuum of foot and ankle care as we've gotten deeper into this and technology has caught back up is absolutely rewarding. And I'll be honest, I can't imagine doing anything else at this point in my life. I really can't.
So you're not going to pivot?
If I'm going to pivot, it's going to pivot into retirement
or
academics.
Right.
Yeah, where I'm going to completely change.
Right.
Right. But no, I am absolutely in love with what I do. And hopefully when people meet me and see me, it shows.
It shines through with patients and
Yeah.
fellows alike.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you this. Maybe these are loaded questions. What are your favorite procedures? What are your favorite pathologies that you like to take to the operating room?
Yeah. So my absolute favorite pathology is ankle instability.
Okay.
So I love medial and lateral ankle instability. That is my absolute favorite thing. With that, it's always arthroscopy. It's whether you're doing an arthroscopic repair, an open repair. Okay. These patients are typically very driven. They're very active individuals, and they have that drive to go and do the physical therapy. They have the drive to go out and be successful with your surgery. And it's fun watching someone who is having difficulty hiking Camelback Mountain, for example. You get them out there, and they're enjoying their life, and they send you photos from the top of the mountain. It's rewarding, right? As physicians, you love to see all the hard work that you've put into it and then give it to somebody else and see that.
It's sobering when they credit you for their success somewhere.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Yeah, no, I kind of go over the board. But if someone said, hey, what is your absolute favorite ankle instability?
There you go. Well, you'll be interested in this, and we'll get a chance to hopefully work together on it. We're bringing in some ankle arthroscopy simulators to the college to kind of implement into our advanced surgical courses. And we have this vision in our lab of the arthroscopy units being almost like a pinball machine, right, with modules that students can learn on. And they'll all be in there vying for their opportunity to work with the arthroscopy simulator. So I'd love to get you involved in that if you're interested.
That's spectacular. And those of you that are involved or even interested in arthroscopy, play as many video games as you can. That hand-eye coordination is something that you can't really teach. It's
right.
Just taken with time.
You know, I started the North Colorado residency program back in the day with Dr. Dan Hatch, who was the president of FACFAS.
Yep.
And one of the challenges we always had with choosing residents is we were trying to make sure we picked a resident whose hands would do what their eyes and brain are telling them. Do you screen your fellows at all? How do you know if that innate ability is there? Is that a fair question?
No, it's a very fair question. I think a lot of programs actually do that. We have not historically done that, but we have other ways to throw people in a little bit of a loop to see how they respond and react. Right. But I love that idea. I remember in residency we had to hand tie while we were getting interviewed.
While they're asking you questions.
While they're asking you questions, yeah.
We used to have this little secret when we would go to Chicago or down to Frisco to interview residents. We'd take them out and shoot pool and see if they had hand-eye coordination and angle cuts and things.
Did you take in the factor of how many beers that they consumed prior?
We had a formula. No, it's all good.
There's always formulations in those.
There are for sure. So I'm going to give you the last word on anything you want, whether it's fellowships or academics, recruiting great students into our wonderful profession.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, is foot and ankle surgery is one of the fastest growing orthopedic subdivisions across the board, right? So we've seen some great revelations and some improvements in what we thought were simple surgeries, and now have become very complex surgeries. So if you're looking for a good career path that is very enlightening, it's very academic, very challenging, foot and ankle is one of the best things that you can do. And like I said, we're both here talking about the reason why we're doing this, and it's after hours, and we're still talking about it, right?
I know. It's the greatest profession ever, and I always enjoy getting the opportunity to talk to leaders in our profession, and actually doing this podcast has given me an opportunity to meet more of them.
Right.
And so I want to thank you for taking the time and meeting me down here and having a nice discussion.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And maybe this could be part one. We'll get some more discussion going on.
Absolutely love it.
For another one. All right.
I appreciate it.
Well, Ryan, I'm going to get you one of these Dean Chat cups, right?
Yes.
I always tell people when you're doing a lot of surgery, I know it's early mornings and late nights, you need to put caffeinated beverages into something. So it might as well be a Dean's Chat cup.
Yeah, my fellows think I'm going to have a heart attack every day because of the amount of caffeine I drink.
That's great.
So,
So for all of our listeners out there, if you're on Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating. If you're watching on YouTube, by all means, please become a subscriber. And until next week, cheers, everybody.